Hi everyone, Lindsay here, Investigative Journalism Fellow with True North. You may have noticed the name of Barry Neufeld in the news recently, but who is he? If you haven't been following this case, I am going to explain it all here. A little over 2 years ago, in October 2017, Chilliwack school trustee Barry Neufeld felt obligated to speak out against SOGI 123, that's Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity 123, a resource kit for BC and Alberta teachers to teach children and youth about LGBTQ issues. In a move that would drastically shake up his career, Neufeld posted the following on Facebook. Okay, so I can no longer sit on my hands. I have to stand up and be counted. A few years ago, the Liberal Minister of Education instigated a new curriculum supposedly to combat bullying, but it quickly morphed into a weapon of propaganda to infuse every subject matter from K to 12 with the latest fad, gender theory. The Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, SOGI, program instructs children that gender is not biologically determined but is a social construct. At the risk of being labeled a bigoted homophobe, I have to say that I support traditional family values, and I agree with the College of Pediatricians that allowing little children to choose to change gender is nothing short of child abuse. But now the BC Ministry of Education has embraced the LGBTQ lobby and is forcing this biologically absurd theory on children in our schools. Children are being taught that heterosexual marriage is no longer the norm. Teachers must not refer to boys and girls. They are merely students. They cannot refer to mothers and fathers either. Increasing numbers of children are growing up in homes with same-sex parents. If this represents the values of Canadian society, count me out. I belong in a country like Russia or Paraguay, which recently had the guts to stand up to these radical cultural nihilists. Mainstream media began covering Neufeld's post within hours, and a couple of days later, Neufeld apologized specifically for his comment that allowing young children to change genders is child abuse. He made it clear that he was critical of an educational resource, SOGI 123, and not individual LGBTQ people themselves. By the new year, in January 2018, Neufeld's colleagues had coordinated an all-out attack on his character. And keep in mind that October 2018, there will be a municipal election. Most of the attacks on Barry Neufeld were coming from Glenn Hansman, then president of the BC Teachers Federation. Glenn Hansman is a teacher and LGBTQ activist who said in media interviews that Neufeld should step down or be removed, that he shouldn't be anywhere near students, and that he tiptoed quite far into hate speech. He also said that Neufeld holds transphobic and bigoted views. Meanwhile, BC's Minister of Education, Rob Fleming, was formally calling on Neufeld to resign, but Neufeld rejected the suggestion, and the Minister of Education does not possess the authority to dismiss an individual trustee. The Chilliwack Board of Education was also calling for Neufeld's resignation, but again, Neufeld wouldn't allow himself to be bullied into resigning. The BC Teachers Federation, the BCTF, then filed a human rights complaint against Neufeld, alleging that his public comments about trans people created an unsafe work environment for teachers and exposed trans people to hatred. The complaint was accepted for filing by the BC Human Rights Tribunal in April 2018. And as a side note, the BCTF describes itself as a social justice union. They publish a quarterly social justice newsletter. If you open their most recent edition, you can read articles like Intersectionality within the Women's Movement and Problematizing Heteronormativity and Gender Binary in Schools. They also host a biennial social justice conference. They offer social justice workshops and provide a variety of social justice grants worth thousands of dollars. They employ an assistant director of social justice, and they encourage teachers to act as social justice school representatives so that they can share social justice material with their school's teaching staff. But it wasn't only the BCTF that filed a human rights complaint against Barry Neufeld. CUPE 411, the Union of Education Assistants and Clerical, Custodial, Transportation, and Maintenance Staff in the Chilliwack School District, they also filed a similar complaint with the BC Human Rights Tribunal, and the tribunal accepted their complaint as well. So to recap, the BC Teachers Federation union leader was publicly calling for Neufeld to step down or resign, and calling him a transphobe. The Minister of Education of the province was saying Neufeld should step down. The Chilliwack School District was publicly saying Neufeld should step down. And the BC Teachers Federation and another teaching staff union, QP411, filed human rights complaints against Neufeld. Not only was he being subject to attacks by union leaders and bureaucratic higher-ups, but Neufeld was simultaneously being alienated by his colleagues throughout the year. In February 2018, a BC School Trustee Association meeting was cancelled because Neufeld insisted he be able to attend, because this was a BC school trustee meeting, and Neufeld is a school trustee. However, the Maple Ridge School Board was saying that Neufeld's presence would be a violation of their safe, caring, and healthy schools policy. In June 2018, Neufeld was told by the school board that he was prohibited from being on stage with the other trustees during a school graduation ceremony and prohibited from shaking the hands of the graduating students, all because his presence was apparently unsafe to LGBTQ individuals. Neufeld was being mobbed, attacked, and snubbed by almost everyone surrounding him in his profession. Yet, he ran for re-election in October 2018, and he won. But one day before the election, Neufeld filed a defamation suit against Glenn Hansman, alleging Glenn Hansman had publicly painted him as a transphobic, homophobic bigot unfit to work in schools, and that he has suffered damages to his reputation professionally, socially, and generally within his community, across Canada, and internationally. Enter 2019. On March 25th, 2019, the Protection of Public Participation Act came into force in British Columbia. The legislation's purpose is to protect public participation in matters of public interest by attempting to balance the rights of individuals to protect their reputations against the obvious benefit to a democratic society of protecting free speech and rigorous debate on issues of public interest. The PPPA is comparable to so-called anti-SLAPP legislation or strategic lawsuits against public participation. Glenn Hansman applied to dismiss Neufeld's defamation action against him pursuant to this new PPPA legislation, arguing that Neufeld sued him because of comments that he made in relation to a subject that was of public interest. In a November 26, 2019 judgment, Justice Alan Ross stayed Neufeld's lawsuit from proceeding any further, determining that Hansman had established grounds for dismissing Neufeld's claim under the new legislation. Justice Ross wrote that while the plaintiff has an interest in claiming damages and clearing his good name, the public has an interest in protecting expressions that relate to public debate. So while the courts may have thrown out Neufeld's defamation suit, it is still undeniable that Glenn Hansman and his social justice union, as well as the education minister and Chilliwack Board of Education, they were on a crusade to systematically undermine Neufeld's character and credibility. And the crusade against Neufeld isn't over yet. It's going to keep going through the BC Human Rights Tribunal cases filed against him by the BCTF and by QP411.